I see that you have married a good woman, one with a heart as beautiful as her face. She respects you, and I can see the love in her eyes when she looks at you. That is a blessing, my son, one not every man is fortunate to have." She paused, her gaze softening as if weighing the words she was about to say. But a home needs balance. Love alone, as strong as it may be, cannot hold up a house on its own. There are other foundations, other pillars, and one of them is care. Not just the emotional kind, but the tangible, everyday care that makes a man feel grounded in his own home. As Adetola and Olashewa settled into their modest new home, the sweetness of their newlywed bliss quickly gave way to the inevitable tests of daily life. Their first challenge arose in an unexpected place: the kitchen. Olashewa, a woman who had grown up enveloped in the comforts of privilege, found herself confronted by an entirely unfamiliar world. In her family's opulent household, meals were never a concern. Food would appear as if by magic, plated to perfection by skilled cooks who seemed to read her every craving. The aroma of expertly prepared delicacies had always been part of her life's rhythm, but she had never paused to wonder about the labor behind it. Now, standing in her small kitchen with its plain counters and a pot bubbling awkwardly on the stove, she was confronted by a stark reality. The first time she tried to cook for Adetola, the result was comically disastrous. Smoke filled the kitchen as she overcooked the rice, forgetting to turn down the flame while distracted by her frantic search for spices she didn't know how to use. The stew she attempted afterward was a watery concoction, devoid of seasoning and unrecognizable even to her. When she finally presented the meal, her husband's bemused but gentle expression was the only thing that kept her from bursting into tears. "You tried," Adetola said with a warm smile, taking a spoonful of the barely edible food. His words, though kind, felt like salt on her wounded pride. For Olashewa, the kitchen became a battlefield, a place where her lack of knowledge clashed with her desire to be the wife Adetola deserved. Frustration simmered within her, not just because of the mistakes but because of the deep-seated insecurity they unearthed. She hated feeling helpless, and each culinary misstep seemed to whisper that she wasn't cut out for this life. Yet, she also felt a flicker of determination. Adetola's gentle encouragement, coupled with her own stubborn pride, fueled a growing resolve to learn. In moments of solitude, Olashewa would sit by the window, her thoughts tangled between memories of her luxurious upbringing and the stark simplicity of her new life. She missed the ease of her old world but felt an unexpected thrill at the prospect of mastering something new for the sake of love. Late at night, after Adetola had fallen asleep, she would search for recipes in old magazines she found at the local market. By day, she would experiment, often burning, undercooking, or outright ruining meals. Yet with each attempt, she began to learn. Slowly but surely, she discovered the art of balancing flavors and the rhythm of timing. A far cry from the woman who once thought cooking was as simple as stirring a pot. Their modest kitchen, once a source of frustration, transformed into a space of quiet triumphs and occasional laughter. Though the meals were far from perfect, they carried the warmth of her effort, and with every shared plate, their bond deepened. For Adetola, it wasn't about the food. It was about the heart Olashewa poured into it. For Olashewa, every small victory in the kitchen felt like a step closer to embracing her new life and the man she loved. At first, Adetola took it in stride, approaching the situation with the kind of quiet understanding that had always been his nature. He knew his wife's upbringing had been worlds apart from his. Olashewa had grown up surrounded by luxury, where every whim was catered to before it even formed fully in her mind. The intricacies of domestic life, like cooking, cleaning, or managing a household, had never been her concern. Meals in her family's estate had been prepared by chefs with an almost artistic flair, and she'd never needed to consider the effort it took to transform raw ingredients into something nourishing. Adetola understood this, so he stepped in without complaint, taking charge of the kitchen whenever they weren't ordering food from one of the small eateries near their home. He would tie an apron around his waist and hum softly as he chopped vegetables or stirred a pot of steaming soup. Adetola's casual ease in the kitchen only magnified Olashewa's discomfort. She watched him from the doorway, her arms crossed, feeling a growing weight of embarrassment settle in her chest. He never made her feel inadequate. On the contrary, he was patient and encouraging, often cracking jokes about his own early mishaps in the kitchen. Yet, his kindness only deepened her sense of helplessness. She wanted to be more than a spectator in their new life. This was their home, their beginning, and she wanted to contribute in ways that mattered. But every attempt she made to prepare something meaningful seemed to end in smoke, spilled ingredients, or unrecognizable dishes. Her repertoire was painfully limited. She could brew tea and whip up instant noodles without much trouble. But anything beyond that felt like venturing into an uncharted wilderness. The first time she tried to fry plantains, they emerged from the oil burnt to an unappetizing crisp. Her attempt at making stew was equally disastrous. Her measurements for salt and pepper so wildly off that Adetola had to gulp down water after his first taste, laughing between coughs. Though he always reassured her, joking that cooking wasn't a skill anyone was born with, the humor didn't lessen her frustration. Alone in quiet moments, Olashewa wrestled with a mix of emotions: gratitude for Adetola's unwavering support, guilt for her lack of skill, and a fierce determination to do better. She wasn't just failing at cooking. To her, it felt like she was failing at being the wife she had imagined herself to be. It wasn't about traditional roles or expectations. It was about showing her love and commitment through action. For the first time, she felt the true weight of leaving behind her privileged upbringing to build a life with Adetola. It was humbling, yes, but it also planted a seed of resolve. Though the kitchen felt like a battleground now, Olashewa silently vowed that she wouldn't let her inexperience define her. Every failure, she told herself, was simply another step toward learning. Their first significant test came when Adetola's mother, Mama Ade, announced her intention to visit them shortly after their honeymoon. The news was both thrilling and daunting for Olashewa. Mama Ade was a woman of immense wisdom, well respected not only for her strength and poise but also for her sharp wit and keen eye for detail. Her visit was meant to be a warm, celebratory affair. A few days spent imparting her wealth of experience on marriage, managing a home, and, most importantly, what it meant to be a truly supportive wife. While Adetola greeted the news with casual enthusiasm, Olashewa found herself overwhelmed by a swirling mix of emotions. Excitement danced on the edges of her nervousness. She admired Mama Ade deeply, not just as her husband's mother, but as a figure of strength and guidance. Gaining her approval meant everything to Olashewa, and she saw this visit as an opportunity to forge a deeper bond with her new family. Yet, beneath the excitement was an undercurrent of anxiety. Olashewa couldn't shake the feeling that this visit was also an unspoken test. Mama Ade's reputation for her skill in the kitchen and her meticulous standards for running a household loomed over Olashewa like a shadow. Would her mother-in-law see through her inexperience? Would she be disappointed? In the days leading up to Mama Ade's arrival, Olashewa threw herself into preparation. She scrubbed the modest apartment until it gleamed, rearranged the furniture for a welcoming touch, and even attempted to bake a simple cake to impress her guest. An endeavor that ended in a charred mess she had to hurriedly dispose of before Adetola noticed. Adetola, ever observant, found her worry endearing and reassured her with his usual calm. "Mama isn't coming here to judge you," he said with a chuckle one evening as they shared a simple meal. "She's coming to spend time with us. Relax, Shua." But relaxing was easier said than done. On the morning of Mama Aid's visit, Olashewa stood by the window, fidgeting with the hem of her dress as she waited for the familiar figure to appear. When she finally arrived, clad in her signature vibrant Ankara wrapper and headscarf, her warm smile immediately put Olashewa at ease, at least momentarily. Mama Aid's hug was firm yet comforting, her presence filling their small home with an energy that was both calming and commanding. As they settled into conversation, Olashewa couldn't help but notice how effortlessly Mama Ade carried herself, her words laced with wisdom and her demeanor radiating confidence. It was clear that this woman was not just visiting to celebrate. She was here to observe, to teach, and perhaps to ensure that her beloved son had chosen well. Olashewa's admiration deepened, but so did her determination to prove herself, not just to Mama Ade, but to herself as well. However, things took an unexpected turn when Mama Ade began to notice small but telling details about their home life. It started with the meals. She observed that dinner was often brought in from local eateries, the neatly packaged containers placed on the table with no sign of a homemade touch. On other occasions, it was Adetola himself who tied an apron around his waist, casually preparing meals with a skill that betrayed years of practice. At first, Mama Ade found it amusing. Her son had always been resourceful, a man who could adapt to any situation. But as the days unfolded, her sharp eyes couldn't miss the untouched pots and pans neatly stacked in the corner of the kitchen, or the pristine stovetop that looked more like a showroom display than the heart of a lived-in home. Mama Aid's initial reaction was subtle. A raised eyebrow here, a lingering glance there, all masked by her trademark gentle smile. She didn't say much, allowing herself to believe that perhaps the couple had simply fallen into a pattern of convenience. But as meal after meal passed without Olashewa stepping into the kitchen, her silence began to take on a weight of its own. She started asking questions, small ones at first, carefully designed to probe without offending. "Ah, Shua, this stew is delicious," she said one evening, tasting a dish Adetola had prepared. "You must tell me your secret." Olashewa froze under her mother-in-law's curious gaze, fumbling for words that never came. Adetola, sensing her discomfort, quickly interjected with a light-hearted joke about Olashewa being more focused on decorating their new home than cooking. Though it drew a chuckle from Mama Ade, Olashewa could feel the sting of inadequacy burning deep within her. She knew what was coming. As each day passed, Mama Aid's unspoken disapproval became harder to ignore. It wasn't in harsh words or overt criticism. No, that wasn't her style. Instead, it was in the way her smile became more restrained, the way her compliments grew fewer, the way her once eager advice on managing a household turned into polite but pointed suggestions. "Every wife should know how to feed her husband," Mama Ade remarked one afternoon. Her tone as warm as ever, but her words unmistakably sharp. "It's a way of nurturing, of building a home." Olashewa nodded quietly, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. She admired Mama Ade deeply and wanted nothing more than to earn her respect. But her limited experience in the kitchen now felt like an insurmountable barrier. Mama Aid's growing disapproval wasn't just about the meals. It was about the values they symbolized: commitment, care, and the ability to build something meaningful from scratch. To Olashewa, it was a painful reminder of how far she still had to go. Yet, beneath her embarrassment, a seed of resolve began to take root. She would learn, not just for Mama Aid's approval, but to prove to herself that she could rise to the challenge. One crisp morning, as sunlight filtered through the small kitchen window, Mama Ade decided to observe how her daughter-in-law managed breakfast. She quietly took a seat in the corner, her sharp eyes following every movement.
Oh yes. I hope you are enjoying the story. Please remember to subscribe, like and turn on the notification bell if you have not done so. I covet it much. And thank you for doing so. Now let's continue the story.
Olashewa moved with nervous determination, pulling out a kettle and filling it with water to heat for tea. The silence was broken only by the soft hum of the stove as she opened a packet of instant noodles and placed them in a pot of boiling water. To Olashewa, it felt like a simple and efficient meal. To Mama Ade, it was something entirely different. The older woman's brow furrowed as she took in the scene before her. She didn't say anything at first, her expression carefully neutral, but her thoughts were loud. Was this all her son's wife could manage? Was this the foundation on which their home would be built? When the aroma of the noodles began to fill the air, Mama Ade cleared her throat, her voice soft yet laced with an unmistakable firmness. "My dear," she began, choosing her words with care, "is this all you know how to make for your husband?" The question landed like a stone in the quiet kitchen. Olashewa froze, her hands gripping the edge of the counter as her cheeks flushed a deep crimson. She couldn't bring herself to look up, feeling the weight of Mama Aid's gaze. Her lips trembled as she searched for a response, the shame of her inexperience bubbling to the surface. I didn't really learn to cook growing up, Mama," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "We always had cooks at home. I'm trying to learn now, but it's harder than I thought." Her confession hung in the air, vulnerable and raw. Mama Aid's sharp gaze softened, but only slightly. She stood up slowly, her presence commanding the small room. Walking over to where Olashewa stood, she placed a firm yet reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Cooking is not just about feeding someone, Shua," she said, her tone still kind but tinged with the weight of her wisdom. "It's about care. It's about creating something with your own hands, pouring your love and effort into it. That's what makes a house feel like a home." Olashewa nodded, unable to meet her mother-in-law's eyes. She felt a twinge of guilt mixed with determination. Mama Ade wasn't scolding her. She was challenging her. And deep down, Olashewa knew that this was a challenge she needed to face. Not just for her husband or to gain his mother's approval, but to prove to herself that she could grow into the role she so desperately wanted to fill. Mama Ade, who had arrived with high hopes of passing down cherished family recipes and teaching her daughter-in-law the art of crafting the traditional meals her son loved, felt a deep pang of disappointment as she watched the scene unfold. She had imagined mornings filled with the aromatic steam of freshly pounded yam, afternoons rich with the tang of spicy egusi soup bubbling over the fire, and evenings of shared laughter as she guided Olashewa through the timeless rituals of her kitchen. Instead, she was met with a stark reality. A kitchen barely touched and a young woman whose culinary skills seemed woefully inadequate for the life ahead. She stood at the doorway, her arms folded, her heart heavy as she watched Adedala move about the kitchen, laughing softly as he tried to ease his wife's embarrassment. He showed her how to dice onions without tearing up and guided her in adding salt, just a pinch at a time. Olashewa's face was a mixture of concentration and frustration. her hands fumbling but determined. Adetila's patience and tenderness warmed Mama Aid's heart, but it also deepened the ache she felt. To her, seeing her son take on these roles, a wife's roles, as she had been taught, was like watching pieces of her own teachings slip away, replaced by a modernity she didn't fully understand or accept. As the day wore on, Mama Ade remained unusually quiet, her thoughts swirling with a mix of sadness and resolve. When she finally spoke, it was a quiet murmur, almost as though she was speaking more to herself than anyone else. So my son will not eat proper food in his own home? The words were simple, but they carried the weight of generations of tradition and expectation. She remembered the hours she had spent in her own kitchen, teaching Adetila's sisters how to knead dough, stir soups to perfection, and imbue every dish with the love and care that she believed defined a wife's touch. To see her son now, in his own home, taking on these tasks, it felt like a reversal of roles, an erosion of the values she had spent her life upholding. Mama Ade spent the rest of the day in thoughtful silence, her eyes keenly observing the young couple. She noted the tenderness between them, the way Adetila never seemed irritated, but instead encouraged Olashewa with gentle words and guiding hands. Despite her disapproval, she could see that there was love here, a love that was patient, kind, and willing to grow. Yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that something vital was missing, a foundation that Olashewa had yet to build. By evening, as the smell of a simple jollof rice, prepared mostly by Adetila, wafted through the house, Mama Ade sat at the table, her heart heavy but her resolve firm. This wasn't just about the food or the kitchen. It was about tradition, about the pride of creating a home where both love and responsibility were shared. And while disappointment lingered, so did a flicker of hope. Mama Ade decided that she would not let her teachings end here. If Olashewa was willing, she would guide her, not just for Adetila's sake, but for the woman she hoped her daughter-in-law could become. The next morning, after a particularly quiet breakfast of store-bought pastries served with lukewarm tea, Mama Ade couldn't hold back her thoughts any longer. The cheerful clinking of cups and plates had done little to mask the underlying tension, and as Adetila helped clear the table, his mother quietly beckoned him to join her in the small sitting room. The air was heavy with unspoken words, and Adetila, sensing the seriousness of her expression, followed without hesitation. "Adetila," she began, her voice gentle but firm, the way only a mother's could be when delivering hard truths. "I see that you have married a good woman, one with a heart as beautiful as her face. She respects you, and I can see the love in her eyes when she looks at you. That is a blessing, my son, one not every man is fortunate to have." She paused, her gaze softening as if weighing the words she was about to say. "But a home needs balance. Love alone, as strong as it may be, cannot hold up a house on its own. There are other foundations, other pillars, and one of them is care. Not just the emotional kind, but the tangible, everyday care that makes a man feel grounded in his own home." Adetila shifted in his seat, his easy smile fading into a look of contemplation. Mama Ade leaned forward slightly, her tone now edged with quiet urgency. "Your wife must learn to cook, my son," she said, each word deliberate and heavy with meaning. "Not because I expect her to be in the kitchen every hour or because it's a duty. No, it is because there is power in knowing that you can provide comfort to the one you love. Food is not just about filling the stomach. It's about warmth, tradition, and the heart of a home. You deserve that, and she deserves to know the joy of giving you that." Adetila opened his mouth to respond, But Mama Ade raised a hand, stopping him gently. "How can I rest, my son?" she continued, her voice cracking ever so slightly, "knowing that you eat noodles and tea every day. You are the man of this house, yet I see you carrying burdens you should not have to bear alone. It is not about weakness or strength, Adetola. It is about partnership. She must learn, and you must guide her. For this is your home together. Build it, nurture it, grow it." Adetola's face softened as her words sank in. He nodded slowly, understanding the wisdom in her counsel even as he considered the delicate balance of supporting Olashewa without making her feel inadequate. Mama Ade, seeing his thoughtful expression, reached out and placed her hand over his. "I say this because I love you both," she said quietly. "She is a good woman, and I see her willingness to learn. But a garden will not bloom without guidance and care. Help her, my son. Be patient, but do not let her remain where she is." As Adetola sat with his mother's words, he realized that her advice was not a critique but a call to action. A reminder that the strength of their marriage would depend on their ability to grow and build together. Adetola let out a long, measured sigh, the weight of his mother's words settling heavily on his shoulders. He understood her concerns, her desire for him to have the warmth and care that only a loving, capable partner could provide. But his heart ached at the thought of Olashewa being judged so harshly for circumstances beyond her control. "Mama," he said softly, his tone both firm and gentle, "I understand what you're saying, but you must also understand this. She is trying. She didn't grow up like us, with kitchens full of spices and stories passed down through meals. It's not her fault. She wants to learn, and I want to help her. This is our journey, Mama, and we'll walk it together." Mama Ade's eyes, sharp and discerning, softened for a brief moment as she listened to her son defend his wife. She could hear the love in his voice, the unwavering belief in Olashewa's potential, and it stirred a flicker of hope in her heart. But it wasn't enough to ease her disquiet. She had come with dreams of bonding over steaming pots of soup, of passing down the sacred recipes she had spent decades perfecting. She had envisioned mornings filled with laughter and lessons, her daughter-in-law eagerly absorbing every tip and trick. Instead, she had been met with hesitant hands and an unfamiliarity with the kitchen that made her question whether Olashewa was ready for such a responsibility. Mama Ade hummed, her lips pressing into a thin line as she folded her hands across her lap. "I hear you, my son," she said finally, her voice tinged with a hint of sadness. "But seeing you eat store-bought pastries and noodles in your own home, it does something to me. A man should return to his house and taste the care of his wife in every bite. I hope to teach her, to guide her." But she trailed off, her gaze distant, as though searching for the right words to express her disappointment without wounding her son. "Perhaps I came too soon. Perhaps she's not ready yet." The admission hung in the air, heavy and bittersweet. Adetola wanted to reassure her, to promise that things would get better, but he knew his mother too well. She had always been a woman of action, someone who believed that love was as much about doing as it was about feeling. Seeing the gap between her expectations and reality had clearly unsettled her. By the next morning, Mama Ade made a quiet decision. She approached Olashewa with a warm but reserved smile, offering a few parting words of encouragement and leaving behind a neatly written notebook of her treasured recipes. "These are for you, my dear," she said, handing it over with both hands. "When you're ready, these pages will guide you. Cooking is not just a skill. It's a way to show love." As Mama Ade prepared to leave, The air in the small sitting room felt heavy with unspoken words and lingering emotions. She took Olashewa's hands gently in hers, her weathered palms warm and firm, and her gaze steady yet tender. Her voice, when she spoke, was a blend of encouragement and an unspoken plea, rich with the wisdom of years and the weight of her hopes. "My dear," she began softly, her words carrying an almost melodic rhythm, "I see your heart, and I know it is good. The way you look at my son, the way you light up when he walks into the room, there is no doubt that you love him deeply. And that is a beautiful thing, one many wives fail to show." Olashewa's lips parted as though she wanted to respond, but Mama Ade continued, her hands squeezing gently to emphasize the importance of her words. "But love, my daughter, is more than just the warmth of emotions. Love also means care, tangible care for his well-being in every way. A good home is more than a roof over your heads. It's a place of nourishment, both for the soul and the body. A man like Adetola, who works hard and loves even harder, deserves to come home to a sanctuary. And that sanctuary begins in the little things. The meals that tell him, 'I see you,' and the care that says, 'You matter.'" Her voice trembled slightly, not from anger or disappointment, but from a deep yearning for Olashewa to understand the depth of her responsibility. "Take the time to learn," she urged, her eyes glistening with sincerity. "Not just for him, but for yourself, for the family you'll one day grow. Build a home he can always come back to with joy, knowing it is filled with love in every corner."
Oh yes. I hope you are enjoying the story. Please remember to subscribe, like and turn on the notification bell if you have not done so. I covet it much. And thank you for doing so. Now let's continue the story.
"You will find, my dear, that there is a unique joy in these small acts of care. They are not chores, they are gifts. And there is no greater gift than seeing the one you love thriving because of what you've done." Olashewa's vision blurred as her emotions bubbled to the surface. Her heart tugged in a dozen directions by Mama Ade's words. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, unwilling to let them fall in this moment of quiet determination. "Mama, I understand," she whispered, her voice quivering but resolute. "I know I've fallen short, and I promise, I will learn. I will do better. I want to be everything he needs and more." Mama Ade's expression softened into a smile, faint but hopeful, as she cupped Olashewa's cheek gently. "That's all I ask, my dear. The willingness to grow, to try. That is what builds a strong marriage." She released her hands slowly, as if reluctant to let go, and stepped back. Her gaze lingered on her son and his wife, her heart heavy but comforted by the flicker of determination she had seen in Olashewa's eyes. Mama Ade packed her bags and prepared to leave. Adetola's protests were met with a gentle wave of her hand. "I'll come again," she said, her voice steady but distant. "When the time is right." As she walked to the waiting car, her heart felt heavy, not with anger, but with the lingering ache of unfulfilled expectations. She glanced back at her son and his wife standing in the doorway, and though she smiled, it didn't quite reach her eyes. As the car pulled away, Adetola placed a reassuring arm around Olashewa, who clutched the recipe notebook to her chest. They stood in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. Mama Ade's visit had left a mark, but perhaps, Adetola hoped, it was one that would push them closer to the balance they both sought to build. As the door closed behind Mama Ade and the car rumbled down the dusty street, Olashewa stood in the doorway clutching the recipe notebook her mother-in-law had left behind. Her heart felt heavy with the weight of her shortcomings, But within that heaviness was a spark of resolve. She turned to Adedala, who wrapped an arm around her shoulders and smiled reassuringly. In that moment, Olashewa made a silent promise to herself. She would not let Adedala down. She would learn, even if it meant burning pots, botched recipes, and countless hours spent in trial and error. For their love, for their home, and for the life they were building together, she would try. Determined to turn her mother-in-law's parting words into action, Olashewa resolved to master the art of cooking. A task that felt as intimidating as climbing a mountain, but one she was determined to conquer. She began with what she knew, the recipe notebook Mama Ade had left behind. Its pages, filled with neat handwriting and the occasional smudge of oil or spice, became her guide. But even those carefully outlined steps often felt like decoding a foreign language. What exactly did a pinch of salt mean? How much water was just enough to steam the rice? Each morning, Olashewa rose early, armed with a resolve that was both thrilling and daunting. The kitchen became her classroom, her battleground, and her sanctuary all at once. She pored over cookbooks, flipping through their colorful pages with wide-eyed curiosity, watching cooking videos late into the night to understand techniques she had never imagined existed. On the days Adedala wasn't working late, he would stand beside her, offering gentle guidance as they laughed over her missteps. Like the time she used too much pepper in the egusi soup, leaving them both guzzling water between bites. But it wasn't always laughter. There were moments of frustration that left her standing by the sink, staring at a ruined dish with tears pricking her eyes. She remembered the first time she tried making jollof rice from scratch, pouring all her effort into carefully layering the flavors only to end up with rice that was burnt at the bottom and undercooked on top. The smoky smell lingered in the kitchen for hours, and she had to open all the windows to air it out. Defeated, she had slumped onto a chair, wondering if she was truly cut out for this. Yet, in those moments of doubt, she found new strength. She reminded herself of the promise she had made, not just to Adedala, but to herself. Love, she realized, was not always grand gestures and perfect outcomes. It was in the effort, the trying, and the resilience to keep going when things got tough. And so, she picked herself up and tried again. Slowly, progress came. The burnt pots became fewer, the stews more evenly spiced, and the rice fluffier. She started to take pride in the little victories. The first time her akara came out golden and crispy instead of soggy, or when Adedala took a bite of her newly perfected ogbono soup and closed his eyes in genuine delight. His words, "This tastes just like home," became a badge of honor for her, a sign that her efforts were paying off. In time, the kitchen transformed from a place of frustration to one of joy and discovery. Olashewa began to experiment, adding her own touches to traditional recipes while still honoring their essence. The more she cooked, the more confident she became, and the kitchen became not just a space to prepare meals but a testament to her growth, love, and determination. Each evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the faint glow of twilight filled their small home, Olashewa would place a plate in front of Adedala with a mix of anticipation and pride. The journey to that moment was rarely smooth. There were often moments of chaos in the kitchen, the occasional scorch of a forgotten pot, or the need to start over when a recipe went awry. Yet, with each dish she managed to create, her confidence grew, and so did her excitement to share her progress. The aroma of freshly cooked meals soon began to replace the sterile scent of takeout containers that had once been a staple in their home. One evening, it was the smoky allure of jollof rice paired with fried plantains so golden they looked like sunlight on a plate. Another, It was a rich pot of banga soup, its flavors so layered and intricate that even Adetola raised his eyebrows in pleasant surprise. He would take a bite, savoring the taste, and smile at her. A smile that carried 1,000 unspoken words of gratitude and admiration. For Olashewa, these moments were everything. The kitchen had become her stage, and every meal she presented felt like a performance of love, effort, and growth. She watched Adetola closely during each dinner, her heart skipping whenever he nodded approvingly or leaned back with a satisfied sigh. "This is really good, Shua," he would often say, his voice laced with genuine warmth, and she would beam, her earlier struggles melting away in an instant. But it wasn't just about the food. With every dish she mastered, Olashewa felt herself becoming more attuned to what it meant to build a home. Not just a physical space, but a haven filled with warmth, care, and shared moments. The act of cooking became symbolic of her commitment, a way to express love that words could not fully capture. She began to feel a deeper connection to her role as a partner, not out of obligation, but because she genuinely wanted to stand beside Adetola in every sense. Their home transformed in ways that went beyond the meals on the table. The laughter that echoed in the kitchen during her experimental cooking sessions spilled into the rest of their lives, strengthening their bond. The aroma of her cooking became a comfort to Adetola, a sign that no matter how challenging his day had been, he could always return to a place of solace. Olashewa, too, felt the change within herself. With each evening meal, she stepped closer to the woman she had always hoped to be, strong, capable, and unyielding in her love. The burnt pots and sleepless nights of doubt had become her stepping stones. And in their place now stood a partner who not only loved Adetola deeply, but could show that love in every aspect of their shared life. And though Mama Ade had left earlier than planned, Adetola and Olashewa decided to visit her one weekend, eager to bridge any lingering gaps and showcase the growth that had transformed their home. The 3-day visit to Mama Ade's home was not just a chance to reconnect, but an unspoken test. A moment for Olashewa to demonstrate that she had truly embraced the journey she had begun. From the moment they arrived, Olashewa's determination shone. She immediately made herself at home in the kitchen, rolling up her sleeves and diving into preparations. The kitchen, once an intimidating battlefield for her, now felt like a place of confidence and creativity. She carefully planned meals, making sure each one carried a touch of the family traditions she had learned alongside the unique flair she had developed on her own. The air soon filled with the inviting aroma of egusi soup, pounded yam, fried plantains, and even freshly baked chin-chin, a treat Mama Ade hadn't tasted in years. Mama Ade sat in her favorite chair, her sharp eyes watching from the corner of the room. At first, she said little, observing quietly as Olashewa moved about with an ease that hadn't been there during her initial stay. But as dish after dish made its way to the table, her surprise turned to delight. Every bite was a revelation, a testament to the young woman's dedication. The egusi soup was rich and perfectly seasoned, the pounded yam soft and smooth, and the plantains fried to golden perfection. By the second day, Mama Ade could no longer contain her pride. "That's my daughter-in-law," she murmured to herself as she savored another spoonful of Olashewa's hearty pepper soup. Her smile grew wider with each meal, her heart swelling with gratitude. It wasn't just the food. It was the thought and care woven into every detail. Olashewa's efforts spoke volumes, not just of her skill but of the love and respect she carried for her husband and his family. On the final morning of their visit, Mama Ade took Olashewa's hands into her own, her voice thick with emotion. "My dear," she began, her eyes glistening with pride. "You have truly become the heartbeat of this home. You have shown me that love, when guided by determination and humility, can overcome anything. Thank you for making my son's home a place of joy and nourishment." With that, she showered Olashewa with heartfelt prayers, her words full of blessings for her marriage, her future, and the continued strength of her home. The warmth in her voice wrapped around Olashewa like a protective cloak, and in that moment, Olashewa felt not just accepted but deeply cherished. As they packed to leave later that afternoon, the bond between mother and daughter-in-law had transformed. What had once been marked by doubt and quiet tension was now filled with mutual respect and admiration. Mama Aid's prayers lingered in Olashewa's heart as a reminder that her journey, though challenging, had been worth every step. From this story, one can learn that love and growth require effort and sacrifice. True love is not just about feelings, but also about the willingness to grow, adapt, and make sacrifices for the people you care about. Olashewa's journey demonstrates that love involves stepping out of your comfort zone and embracing challenges for the sake of a stronger relationship. Her determination to learn how to cook, despite her privileged upbringing, underscores the importance of taking responsibility for your role in building a nurturing and harmonious home. Also, patience and encouragement foster positive change. Adetala's patience and support played a critical role in Olashewa's transformation. Rather than criticizing her for her shortcomings, he encouraged her and worked with her through her struggles. Similarly, Mama Aid's eventual recognition of Olashewa's efforts and her prayers of blessing highlight the power of encouragement and affirmation. These acts of patience and understanding can inspire growth and strengthen bonds within a family.
Thanks for watching today's story. I believe you enjoyed every bit of it all. Now I want you to do me one favor. Subscribe to this channel, like and turn on the notification bell if you have not done so that whenever I release my next video you will be notified immediately. See you soon.